Four friends Tom, Jack, Brian, and Sarah had been planning their weekend road trip for weeks. The goal was simple: an exciting motorcycle journey from New York City to Harpersville, a small town nestled in the countryside, known for its tranquility and scenic beauty. They were all passionate motorcyclists, and there was no better way to relax than hitting the open road, away from the busy streets of the city. It was a Friday evening when they decided to begin the trip. The weather was perfect for a ride: clear skies and a crisp breeze. They'd all ridden their bikes before, but this time they were determined to take it slow and enjoy the journey. No deadlines, no rush. Just a few days of freedom on the road. As night fell, the four friends rode through the streets of New York, heading out of the city towards the open highway. The hum of their bikes, the smell of fresh air, and the thrill of the unknown stretched out ahead of them, filling their hearts with excitement. There's something magical about night riding. It's just you, the bike, and the endless road. The lights from their motorcycles pierced the darkness as they sped down the highway, feeling at peace in the stillness of the night. After several hours of riding, they stopped at a rest area to take a break and grab some snacks. As they stretched their legs and refueled their bikes, they discussed their route. Tom, who had done most of the planning, had pulled up Google Maps to chart their path. But when he checked, he noticed something unusual. Google Maps had suggested a shortcut that promised to cut 70 miles off their journey. "It's not even on the main highway," Tom said, furrowing his brow, "but it says it's faster, and it's all paved. What do you think? Should we take it?" Jack, always the adventurous one, nodded enthusiastically. "Why not? It'll be an adventure. We'll get to see some new places." Brian, the most cautious of the group, hesitated. "I don't know, guys. The map says we'll be passing through some small towns. What if the road isn't as good as it looks?" But Sarah, who was excited by the idea of exploring new roads, chimed in. "Come on, Brian. It'll be fun. We'll be fine. Besides, we've got Google to guide us." And so, despite Brian's misgivings, they all agreed to take the shortcut. They set their bikes in motion and followed the directions that Google Maps provided. The first few miles were uneventful, but as they ventured deeper into the countryside, the landscape began to change. The road became narrower, and the trees grew thicker on either side. The familiar hum of the highway was replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of their bikes. The night seemed to grow darker with each passing minute. The road they were on no longer resembled a regular highway. It was a rural backroad, winding through dense forests and remote farmland. The road signs were few and far between, and there were no other vehicles in sight. The deeper they drove, the more isolated they felt. "I'm starting to feel like we're in the middle of nowhere," Brian said, his voice tinged with unease. "Are you sure this is the right way?" "Relax," Tom said, glancing at his phone. "Google says we're on track. It's just a back road, but it's faster. Just a few more miles, and we'll be back on the main highway." But as they continued, something felt off. The trees on either side of the road seemed to close in on them, blocking out the stars above. The silence was almost oppressive, and the only sound was the hum of their motorcycle engines. It was as if the world had gone quiet. "Is anyone else getting a weird vibe from this place?" Sarah asked, glancing nervously at the others. Jack laughed it off. "It's just a rural area, guys. We're not used to this kind of setting, that's all." But as they rode deeper into the woods, the feeling of unease only grew stronger. The road began to twist and turn, and the trees became more dense, almost suffocating. The headlights of their bikes barely cut through the darkness, and it felt like they were being swallowed by the night. Then, just as they reached a particularly dark stretch of road, Google Maps told them to take a sharp left. It was a dirt road, narrow and winding, that led them further into the forest. The path seemed almost abandoned, with no signs of civilization in sight. Tom glanced at the others, who seemed equally uncertain. "I don't know, guys," Tom said, slowing down. "This doesn't look like the right path. I think we should go back." But Jack, ever the risk-taker, urged them forward. "Come on, it's just a shortcut. We're almost there, and this path could save us a lot of time. Let's just see where it leads." Despite their hesitation, the group decided to follow Jack's lead. They turned onto the dirt road, their bikes kicking up clouds of dust as they moved deeper into the forest. The trees loomed overhead, casting long shadows on the ground. The path was rough, and the sound of their tires crunching on the gravel was the only noise breaking the silence. As they moved further along the path, Tom started to feel a sense of dread wash over him. The road seemed endless, and the darkness felt oppressive. There were no houses, no lights, nothing but the trees and the eerie quiet. Every now and then, they would pass a dilapidated building or an abandoned structure, but no signs of life. "Are we even still on the map?" Brian asked, looking at his phone, "because this looks like it's going nowhere." "I don't know," Tom admitted, his voice tight. "But we have to keep going. We can't turn back now. We've come too far." Suddenly, they spotted something up ahead, a small village that appeared out of nowhere, nestled deep within the woods. The buildings were old and run down, their windows dark and empty. It looked like a ghost town with no signs of life. "Is this even on the map?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "I've never heard of a town this far out." "Let's stop here," Jack said, pulling over. "Maybe we can get some help. This place looks deserted, but it might not be. Let's check it out." They parked their bikes in front of the village's main street. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness. The houses were old, some falling apart, and the street was eerily quiet. No cars, no people, just the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. As they walked through the village, they saw that every house was dark, not a single light in sight. It was as if time had stopped here, leaving the village frozen in a state of abandonment. The air was thick with dust, and there was a faint smell of decay hanging in the air. "This place feels wrong," Brian said, his voice low. "I don't like it here. We need to go." But as they turned to leave, they noticed something even stranger. There were no sounds of wildlife, no chirping of crickets, no rustling of leaves, just silence. And then, from the shadows of an old house, a figure appeared. It was a woman, dressed in a long, flowing white gown. Her face was hidden in shadow, and her movements were slow and deliberate. She didn't speak, just stood there, watching them with an intensity that made their blood run cold. "Who is that?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Tom said, taking a step back. "But we need to get out of here." Now, the woman remained silent, but she didn't move. Instead, she seemed to follow them with her gaze, her presence suffocating. The air grew colder, and the sense of dread deepened. Without another word, the group turned and ran back to their bikes. As they rode away, they could feel the woman's eyes on them, watching, waiting. The feeling of being pursued never left them. They raced back down the dirt road, not daring to look behind. The village was soon out of sight, but the terror they felt remained. The ride back to the highway was tense, the road ahead seeming endless. The strange woman, the eerie silence, and the haunting presence of the village haunted them every mile. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the highway. They stopped their bikes, gasping for breath, and looked around. The village, the woman, everything had disappeared. It was as if it had never been there at all. "We're never taking a shortcut again," Brian said, his voice shaky. "I don't know what that was," Tom said, his hands trembling on the handlebars. "But we're not going back there." The group sat in silence for a moment, each of them processing what they had just experienced. None of them could explain what had happened, but they all knew one thing for certain. They had just encountered something far beyond the ordinary. From that night on, they made a vow to never let Google Maps lead them down an unknown path again. No matter where they went, they would always trust their instincts and never take the road less traveled. Because sometimes, that road might just lead you straight into the unknown.